But now, I don't know if they're related, but we're going to talk to Sean Bell, who's a military and defence analyst, because Donald Trump has now said, after going quiet on this issue for a while, we have to have Greenland, and we will have it. So let's have a listen to Trump's actual words.
We'll have to work it all out, but he felt very strongly we need it for we need Greenland for national security, not for minerals. We have so many sites for minerals and oil and everything. We have more oil than any other country in the world. We need Greenland for national security. And if you take a look at Greenland, you look up and down the coast, you have Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need it for national security. We have to have it. And he wanted to lead the charge, so we're making him, Marco, today, a special envoy to Greenland. Greenland's a big deal, yeah.
And Donald Trump in the past has said that he's not ruling out military action to take it. So how important really is this strategically? I mean, the first question that comes to mind, if there's any military involved or any aggressive takeover of Greenland, that won't go down well with the rest of Europe and with NATO. So to discuss this, I said, Sean Bell, military and defence analyst. Sean, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
Petrie, good afternoon to you.
Lovely to see you. Look, we're used to this kind of narrative from Donald Trump. I mean, the Canadians must be a little bit worried about this as well. But he says this isn't about minerals. We've got more oil than everybody else. Problem is he's got the wrong oil, so it could well be about minerals. Venezuela, he said, was about drugs. It now turns out that that's about the right kind of oil that they've got to be cleaned in American distilleries, if that's the right word. So do we trust that Trump? What is going on here in your view?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably worth just stepping back just a couple of steps first. I mean, Greenland, most people have only heard of it. There's only 57,000 people who live there. It's been self-governing since, I think, 1979. Denmark actually owns it and worries about its defence and foreign policy. And therefore, and for many years, it was just a sort of frozen wasteland. But of course, with global warming, ice melting, it's suddenly becoming a lot more interesting. And I think there are three issues for me that is one of the reasons why Trump is getting interested. One is defense. He talked about that in the clip you said, with strategic competition in the Arctic, China, Russia, and lots of other people around there. The US have had a military base up there, US Air Force Base, Tula Air Force Base. I think it's now Petrie space, but it's there to track, provide early warning for missile defences, because the missiles tend to go across the pole up there. The second thing is resources. Trump dismissed that, but the harsh reality is, yes, Donald Trump's got lots of oil, maybe the wrong sort, but he hasn't got those, the rare earth minerals. And you'll remember that China has been holding America to ransom a bit about that. That'll have really hacked off Trump. And there are lots of rare earth minerals, apparently. But the third one that worries me far more, exactly as you said, is Trump has sort of not ruled out the use of military force, and that has all sorts of profound implications, not only for global security, but also if nations feel that they are going to be intimidated by a country like America, they'll need nuclear weapons, and we'll see a massive proliferation of nuclear weapons. That is not something anybody wants to see.
He went quiet on this for a while, I think because of the embarrassment that the Greenlanders served up on J.D. Vance and Ursula Vance. You know, people refusing to meet them. It was hugely embarrassing, as the Greenlanders made it very clear they wanted to remain exactly as they are. Since then, we're hearing that there's been almost like a, you know, spies going in there, Americans going into Greenland and trying to change people's viewpoint and change their mind. There's even been talk about offering each Greenlander $10,000 to agree to a referendum to sell out Greenland. I mean, money is everything to him, right? He can't see that people might not want that.
No, but it'd be interesting to see, is there a price for everybody here? I think what's telling is exactly as you say, there's been recent polls that suggest that Greenlanders want to be independent of Denmark, but they, in due course, they are absolutely seem to be virtually unanimously opposed to becoming an American state. So what's been fascinating, I think, you heard Donald Trump talk about a special envoy, I think it's Jeff Landry is the name. I looked into that because I didn't really know what an envoy was. What it actually means is somebody that your hosts don't have to approve. In other words, they're not asking Denmark. America's just announced it as a special envoy. And I think what's happening here is that with only 57,000 people in Greenland, there are all sorts of ways that President Trump might try to exert influence. Financially is definitely one of them. He's justifying on the back of security, but quite frankly, particularly when Denmark is a NATO ally of America.
Exactly.
This is all really odd.
It is very, very strange. And the other thing that I find strange is him citing Russian boats or ships in that area when I thought Russia wasn't a threat to anybody. I thought Russia was the innocent victim of Ukraine.
Well, I think what you're seeing here is a little bit of worry that actually we've got a relatively weak country like Greenland, and therefore Russia, could China, could another country step in and capitalize on those resources? It wouldn't be, given that Russia's decided to invade Ukraine for all sorts of reasons, would it be beyond the wit of man for it to decide to go into Greenland? That is a relatively easy target. Now, for many years, it wouldn't have mattered because there's nothing there. But as I say, with global warming, I think there is quite a prize there. And I think President Trump, rather than looking at it through the lens of how do we bolster Greenland security, how do we help them with their independence, how do we help them maintain a democratic nation, the way he seems to be approaching this is somewhat sinister.
Yeah, I mean, also, I did bring into this conversation Venezuela because a lot of people are now saying, well, he said the quiet bit out loud. He said, we want the oil. I don't think he was at one point saying it was about drugs. I think that was obviously not true, since fentanyl doesn't come from Venezuela. And these boats that they keep blowing up, they haven't got the power to even get to America. So it was clearly not about drugs. It's about regime change and putting in a puppet who will allow him access to those oil fields, which have got the right kind of oil in. He keeps going on about, we know that this is absolute nonsense. He hasn't got the right kind of oil that they need in America. But there's a worry there, isn't there? With again, that if he goes in militarily, that changes everything in that region.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff here, to be honest, Petrie. If you look at this, if you step back, China's been going into all sorts of parts of Africa. Russia has been doing the same in the hunt for scarce resources and providing all sorts of military aid in not quite a takeover, but, basically controlling minerals around the world. And that's not something democracies have done in the past. I think what you're seeing here with an American First campaign is playing very, very dangerously with the rules of democracy, the rule of law. And I do wonder, through great power comes great responsibility. You've got the most powerful nation in the world. Really, up till now, has always set a great example as being the leader of the free world. It's not looking that way at the moment.
Indeed not. And in fact, it is making other South American countries very nervous because they think they're next.
No, understandably so, but I don't think it would just be those countries. If you are trying to secure oil, let's be clear.
Canada.
America's got vast supplies of oil, and therefore it can export some of those, generate wealth that can therefore import what it needs. You don't need to control everything. A democracy and a vibrant economy means you can buy stuff in. I think what's happened with the rare earths is because America has been trying to put tariffs onto China. China said, okay, but we'll stop giving you rare earths. And rare earths are so vital to technology that Trump suddenly found himself out-trumped when it comes to looking at negotiations. Therefore, I suspect Greenland's more about that. Venezuela, I think there's a whole mix of stuff there. But quite frankly, I think the leadership in Venezuela has become an irritant. And all that's happened is Trump's decided he wants to do something about it.
Which is I mentioned Canada because he's also said the same thing about Canada. And do you think that Mark Carney will now be thinking that this hasn't gone away? This whole idea that that's going to be the next state of America. He knows that Trump hasn't dropped that, right?
Well, yes, but it's very difficult to see Trump following through on that. I think what we are seeing is Trump always likes to negotiate from a position of strength. And therefore, if you've got this threat hanging over you, then doing a deal, Trump would always expect for that deal to come out favourably to him. I think where we're seeing the dichotomy is that day one of Trump's presidential time, he said he was going to end the war in Ukraine, and he has the tools to do that. He could make life very difficult for President Putin, but for whatever reason, he's chosen not to do that. So there are some really strange actions going on here that I think the threats to Canada are more for leverage. Why doesn't he do the same with Russia and potentially bring this horrible war in Ukraine to an end?
One word: compromat. That's all I've got to say on that. Before I let you go, Sean, there's been another huge move, actually. We mentioned Ukraine, and this is Poland. Poland are extremely nervous. They've increased their defence budget. They've increased the number of military personnel. They are going hell for leather to prepare for an invasion by Russia. They're really taking it seriously. In fact, they scrambled jets in response to some behaviour from Putin.
Yeah, I mean, having recently been in Poland, for historical reasons, they feel the heat of the Russian invasion of Ukraine far more than we do here. And understandably, they've increased their defence budget markedly. But it wasn't that long ago. I think it was the 9th of September, a whole load of drones, 21 drones, Russian drones, found their way onto Polish territory. And they weren't to know whether they were cruise missiles or explosive or the like. And therefore, it's no great surprise that every time Russia, who last night was targeting energy infrastructure, it appears in Ukraine, a lot of it to the west of the country, close to the Polish border. That means that Polish air defence systems, its radars and its F-16s, its fighter jets were launched. I think what's really tragic here, and I hope we'll see a far more robust response in 2026, was that it was only 10 years ago that a Russian aircraft flew into Turkish airspace. Turkey shot it down. There was absolute apoplexy from President Putin, but ever since then, Putin has never put a fighter jet into Turkish airspace. We have to deal with these things robustly. Simply being kept on the back foot is emboldening Putin, and therefore I hope we're a lot more robust when it comes into the new year.
Yeah, because there's always a danger, isn't there, with these fighter jets? And a lot of people will say to me, you know, why aren't we're flying? We've got all these planes in NATO. We can do all of these things, and the danger is if one is shot down, that's an act of war, and if we shoot one down, that's an act of. So they just rather than. That's why this is quite significant to me, with Poland doing this and saying, look, we're not putting up with this. You're getting too close for comfort, and we're going to show you our teeth. But that brings with it some fear, doesn't it? Some danger.
Well, yeah, I don't think I'd call you out a little bit, Petrie. Shooting down a Russian fighter isn't an act of war if that fighter or those drones are in your airspace. Yeah. They shouldn't be there. Everybody's entitled to defend their national airspace. And Putin, whether it's 3 jets going into Estonian airspace, whether it's military drones going into Romania or to Poland, that is an aggressive act. That needs to be dealt with robustly. And if we don't, all that happens is Putin will try his hand even more. We have to stand on that wall, and we need to be robust.
And you say it's not an act of war, but when that ship was in international waters, getting dangerously close to Britain, Putin did say, if you sink that, even if it does go into British waters, that is an act of war. So he would turn it into an act of war.
Yeah, I think the rhetoric is one thing. We saw that the Yeltsin, it was in international waters, quite rightly. If you attack somebody in international waters, that is an act of war, no problem at all. What we're talking about here is the best way to deter war is to prepare for it. At the moment, we've had 35 years in this country of not spending, of massive reductions in defence spending. There's a wake-up call at the moment, and as a military guy, if we do not prepare for war, Russia will be emboldened and have a go at us. You can't just outsource this to the military. As Ukraine are finding, war comes to you. It's your families that suffer. It's the dreadful attacks last night. 650 drones, a load of missiles came in as well. Putin needs to be managed. He needs to be recognised that the threats far outweigh the benefits if he messes with NATO. We have to be robust. That's the only way to deter Putin.
Briefly, where are we on the peace deal, do you think? And is it ever going to come to anything?
Short answer, very unlikely. All the talks in Berlin, lots of optimism, but quite frankly, Putin was nowhere near that. MI6 boss said there's no evidence whatsoever that Putin's even remotely interested in negotiating anytime soon. So I don't think prospects are looking good for a peace talks anytime early in 2026.
To mark the 4th year as well, goodness me.
Well, heading for the 5th year.
Heading for the 5th, yeah, I know. Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. Sean, thank you very much indeed. I wish you and your family a happy Christmas. And thank you for joining me. Sean Bell there, military and defence analyst. I'm going to